Hi, this is On Air and I'm your host, Klara Syrewicz. Feeling lost, like you no longer understand how democracy works or where checks and balances went? You're not alone. It's time we talked about the Illiberal Internationale. Meanwhile, in our report, we'll focus on tariffs, because how could we not? A fascinating, if quite alarming, spectacle is unfolding worldwide. It's not quite the collapse of the Roman Empire yet, but things are definitely unsettled. And no, it's not just Trump's political and economic wrecking ball. He's more symptom than cause, the inevitable result of a long brewing shift in political norms. And the protoplast of these changes, at least in the Eastern Hemisphere, is him again, Hungary's ever-resourceful Prime Minister. And maybe him too. Hello, Erdogan. But when it comes to manipulating alliances and milking EU membership, Orbán reigns supreme, the master architect of the Illiberal Playbook. This model is what we'll talk about today. Think of it as a how-to guide for aspiring autocrats. Step 1. Manufacture or inflate crises. Ideally security-related, because heightening fear is a classic for the ages. Benjamin Netanyahu's latest Gaza escalation, perfectly timed to smother dissent, is a prime example. Or Slovakia's Robert Fico's flailing around with tales of a coup plot, a Georgian conspiracy and Ukrainian cyber attacks, backed by comically sketchy intelligence reports, all to crush mass protests. Step 2. Purge intelligence services and stack them with loyalists. Then use them against your opponents. Think the former Polish law and justice government, Antal Rogan in Hungary, or Serbia's President Vučić, all using Pegasus spyware against opposition and civil society. Or Trump's recent firing of the NSA chief for perceived disloyalty. Number 3. Attack, defang and change the judiciary, even rewrite the constitution to ensure impunity and create a legal system serving the ruling party, not the rule of law. Examples abound: Law and Justice's fabled court reform, Trump's successful bullying of the courts, or Marine Le Pen's denunciation of her conviction for stealing 4.1 million euros in EU funds through a massive scheme of bogus assistance. Her supporters compared her to Jesus Christ, who was sentenced when innocent, so I suppose his 12 apostles must have been fictitious too. Which brings us to step 4. Undermine independent media and knowledge institutions, universities, think tanks, anyone who asks inconvenient questions. Controlling the narrative is essential. Trump banned the Associated Press from the White House for not parroting his rebranded term for the Gulf of Mexico, while Orbán wields insect-themed insults, intimidations and Secret Service blacklists to keep journalists and NGOs in line. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's latest actions tick nearly every box in the playbook. He's escalated military operations, attempted to fire the Shin Bet director who was investigating corruption, moved to oust the Attorney General, and changed judicial appointment procedures. Well done. But to be shrewd as Master Orbán, you need the secret sauce. State capture must proceed insidiously. Weaken institutions, stifle dissent, but outright autocracy avoid you must, to maintain a veneer of electoral legitimacy and keep EU funds flowing. People must think they still have a say. Now, step 5. Build an international network, something Trump often overlooks at his own peril. Orbán has cultivated a web of allies, from Nigel Farage in the UK and Alice Weidel in Germany to entire governments in the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe. They offer mutual reinforcement, echo chambers and potential material assistance. For instance, Hungary's recent withdrawal from the International Criminal Court, timed with Netanyahu's state visit, is a calculated move that, beside making a point, shields an ally from accountability. Hungary's propaganda machine, like the Megaphone Center, is boosting Viktor's social media efforts with a growing number of fake followers. Arpad Habony, Orbán's spin doctor, dispenses polling and election advice to Slovakia's Fico and Pellegrini, Poland's Law and Justice and pro-Vučić parties in Serbia. Foreign politicians have paid handsomely for Orbán's secret sauce, with Habony bragging about advising Trump's campaign in Florida. These alliances are scaffolded by opaque financial networks, enabling the siphoning of corruption money. In a charming display of international teamwork, funds evaporated from Hungary's National Bank were parked at the Polish company Globe Trade Center during the Law and Justice tenure. Orbán is now trying to claw back these assets. Let's move on to step 6 and the ideological machine. Enter the illiberal ecosystem of think tanks and NGOs, or rather GONGOs, for government-organized, non-governmental organizations. Their narratives and funding have a remarkable consistency with Russian ones. Hungary's MCC think tank in Brussels is under scrutiny for not disclosing its funding sources, despite its EU lobbying activities, and for benefiting from millions in Russian oil profits. The detention of an MCC fellow on suspicion of espionage for Russia and the revelation that MCC employed a journalist secretly working for the Kremlin's disinformation outlet Voice of Europe are hardly surprising. While alongside Poland's Ordo Juris, MCC seeks closer ties with conservative heavyweights like the Heritage Foundation and CPAC, one hopes the latter are aware these entities also cooperate with Russian-aligned networks and financial interests, notably Konstantin Malofeyev, the pan-Slavic, ultra-Orthodox Putin associate, who figures on just about every sanctions list. Which brings us to the main patrons, as behind most illiberal movements, at least in Europe, lurks either Russian money and intelligence or Chinese algorithms, lobbying and corruption fueling investments. And every aspiring autocrat must know how to play his friends and patrons wisely. A very diversified portfolio has allowed Orbán to navigate the seemingly contradictory interests of Trump, Putin, Xi and the EU, all while exploiting Europe's internal squabbles. To his advantage, upholding the rule of law within the EU often feels like herding cats. Hence, the EU's approach has been mostly mild, to put it mildly. The European Parliament started Article 7 proceedings, the so-called nuclear option, against Hungary back in 2018. And it's been in the pipeline ever since, because 4/5 of the EU Council must vote in favour of it, meaning Hungary needs just one ally to block it. But Germany, under its new chancellor, is signalling it's had enough and plans to push for withholding funds and suspending voting rights, although the methods to be used are still debated. Also, the illiberal bonanza has encountered a pushback from unexpected quarters. Trump's bullying and pro-Moscow stance have inadvertently galvanized centrist forces, not just in Europe. Figures like Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico have positioned themselves as pillars of stability and national resilience. In Canada, the Trump-light image of Pierre Poilievre evaporated his chance of election. Other national conservatives are realizing that Make America Wealthy Again comes at the expense of their economies and voters. The Hungarians have unconvincingly blamed the incompetence of Brussels, while Vox leader Santiago Abascal contorted himself in a simultaneous praise of Trump and lament over Spain's economic damage. Figures like Sweden's Jimmy Åkesson and Marine Le Pen have been forced to publicly criticize Trump. Italy's Giorgia Meloni, who fancies herself a Trump whisperer, faces a tough balancing act with significant anti-Trump sentiment among her voters. Also, the illiberal bonanza has encountered a pushback from unexpected quarters. Witness the recent spectacle of Polish-Hungarian Friendship Day, a charade of diplomatic awkwardness, when Law and Justice's President Andrzej Duda made a pilgrimage to Budapest and tried to mend fences while carefully avoiding any mention of Orbán's fondness for the Kremlin. Indeed, despite a polarized political landscape, Polish voters are remarkably unified in their distrust of Russia, and even the far-right Konfederacja party shares this sentiment. Another ally, Andrzej Babiš, co-founder of Patriots for Europe with Orbán and Austria's Herbert Kickl, and who represents Orbán's Plan B to veto the EU, will struggle to side with Hungary on Russian sanctions. Czech voters strongly oppose Russia, with 80% holding negative views. Thus, Orbán's current bet is Slovakia, where a staggering 67% of Smer voters view Russia favourably. And the near-identical pro-Russian and pro-Chinese views of Fico's Smer and the neo-fascist Republika party signal a potential political alignment that could enable Fico to form a government, even in the event of an electoral setback. Orbán's strategic backing of Fico and his complex web of alliances may protect him from external pressure in the short term. But in general, the current fluid political landscape works in his favour and that of other autocrat-adjacent conservatives. Traditional party loyalties fade and voter volatility makes room for new coalitions based more on shared antipathies than ideologies. This may breed Frankenstein-esque couplings of extreme left and right, as the horseshoe theory predicts, but most likely it will unite illiberal conservative parties with extremist ones. For instance, Babiš's ANO with the far-right Freedom and Direct Democracy, or Law and Justice with Konfederacja, or Smer with Republika. These alignments would mirror the French centrist parties scrambling together in 2024 to avoid a Rassemblement National majority, or the 2021 Czech election, where a motley crew of pirates mixed with conservatives triumphed, united solely by their commitment to the European idea. The problem with these big tent movements, though, is that they're fundamentally conflictual and rickety. In that regard, our pervasive uncertainty isn't Trump's doing, but a sign of the times. He's more of an accelerator. The backslide towards strongman rule predates him, but his presidency has arguably emboldened would-be autocrats. Now, the question is, will the centre hold? To talk of a significant escalation in trade tensions would be an understatement, as China and the US have entered a full-blown trade war, while the EU announced its retaliation to a flurry of tariffs imposed by the US administration. Then Trump backed down for a 90-day truce. If no satisfactory agreement is reached over that period, what products or services will be affected? Find out in this report.
The European Union has officially approved a series of retaliatory tariffs targeting US goods. This decision follows the US administration's imposition of a 25% tariff on European steel and aluminum exports, a move that has been met with widespread criticism across the EU. The EU's countermeasures will be implemented in phases, with the initial set of tariffs taking effect on April 15th. Imports affected include metal products, orange juice, rice, motorcycles, and dishwashers. A second phase is scheduled for May 16th, targeting additional US goods such as poultry, beef, cereals, fruits, oils, clothing, and other consumer items like vacuum cleaners and even dental floss. A final phase on December 1st will add duties to commodities like soybeans and almonds. These measures are designed to exert pressure on the US to reconsider its recent trade restrictions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that while the EU prefers a negotiated settlement, it is prepared to take decisive action to protect its economic interests.
We stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table.
The move is not, however, as strong of a response as some had expected.
overall, the package is, if you want, is quite limited in size. It seems to target around 20 billion of US exports, and it targets very specific products, like soybeans and some others. So it's more symbolic, if you want, than a clear response or a strong response to the US tariffs.
The US tariffs have been met with criticism from various EU member states, but not all of them. Hungary's foreign minister showed clearly where his administration stands in this dispute.
The
European Commission made a huge mistake when it didn't negotiate with the Trump administration. They had more than 2 months to do it, and it would have been easy to do what they should have done.
As both sides brace for the economic implications of these tariffs, there are growing calls from global leaders and economic institutions for a return to the negotiating table. The coming weeks will be critical in determining whether both parties can reach a mutually beneficial resolution, or if the trade war will intensify further.
It feels like watching a car crash in slow motion, part of which is the actual crash of the European automotive industry and, ironically, also its American counterpart. While we wait for the fallout, let's meet next week, same time, same place.